Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Genesis chapter 1 and our start of our new study. Today we'll start at verse 1 and go as far as the Lord leads us. And I implore you to certainly ask questions. Some of them I'll answer well, some of them I won't be able to answer at all. And also observations. I know we've all come to this study at various degrees of understanding or research. And so my plan is not to, get bogged down in the weeds of all the false teachings and all the science of Genesis. But certainly if it's on your mind, we will go there and talk about it. So Naomi already has a question.
Oh, yes. Wherever the word God is mentioned, I was wondering if maybe in the future you could give us the Hebrew name that was used and what it means.
Okay, we are going to talk a little bit about God's name here in the first verses, so we will talk about that, yeah. Because it is something you hear conjecture about, and yeah, we'll do that. All right, so verses 1 to 5. A reading from the translation in front of you, which may be different than mine or your neighbor's, but that's okay. Who would like to give us that? Okay.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was undeveloped and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good. He separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
All right. So on the sheet there, we note on verse 1, in the beginning God created. So this phrase contains three important words. There was beginning to all things. In the beginning, God was already present. He doesn't have a beginning or an end. God created the heavens and the earth. The verb translated as create is a special word used only as of God activities and always expresses the origin of something extraordinary and unique. And verse 5, and there was evening and there was morning. So the first day, this sentence appears at the end of the 6 days of creation. We understand them to be specific days of 24-hour duration, not epochs or eons, as some believe. So I will pause there. It's a profound thing that we do not have an account of the creation of God, do we? Right? God. We're told God existed before all this universe existed.
What is epoch?
So an epoch, well, some people want to take verses 1 and 2 and separate them. And kind of say, there's a big expanse of time between each of the days. And we're going to say no. It's very much Hebrew style to give you kind of like the overview and then give you the details. So for example, the Brewers lost 7-2. Period. In the first inning, the Brewers struck out 3 guys. Second, you could tell a story that way, right? You could say, here's what happened, and then go back point by point. And that's kind of what Hebrew does. But if you want to, fuddle with things and try to push evolution into creation, you say, no, that's different. He's saying there was time in between, and this is proof because it's talking about it differently. And and it's not a strong argument, but it's an argument some people will make. And when you get to like when you get to chapter 2, we even go back to Adam and Eve, right? We even go granular on day 6. So, big picture, smaller picture, even more pointed to Adam and Eve here shortly. So anybody know what it's called when you try to mix the Bible and creation together?
What do you mean?
What are you asking?
Well, it's not evolution, but it's called blank evolution. Some people will try to do what's called
Theological evolution or
theistic evolution. Yeah. So, what the author here is trying to dispel a little bit is theistic evolution, and that's the idea that God started things, and then over time they evolved. So if you're trying to find evolution in Genesis, you would say, well, day 1 was a long period of time, and day 2 was a long period of time where it's like Jesus planted the garden, and then over millions and billions of years, it grew, and it became what it is today. There are a lot of Christians that will say they believe in Jesus or the Bible, but then they will put millions of years into their faith in that way. So there's an easy way to explain away that theory, but that's kind of what some people will adopt. Wayne?
That's sort of what some people like Jefferson and other founding fathers believed with deism. God made it, and then he left it just, okay, you can go your own way, rather than he's active in a way.
Right. And we'll see later that Adam and Eve were created as an adult. We'll see that the trees were created with fruit. So if you see big mountains and rock layers that you try to explain with millions of years or billions of years, you don't need to do that. God did create that at one day. So yeah.
Jason Hofstetter has a book that's about this thick that goes into why evolution can't possibly be. And goes through all the faults of evolution. And I don't honestly know how anybody can believe that after studying this book, and he let me borrow it. I studied it for a while. And I made copies of some of the real key things in that book. And I can get some copies made and hand out here and you can see some of these things.
Right, and that's kind of what I want to. I appreciate that, and you're welcome to do that. But again, I'm sitting on books too, and so I want to talk about it, but maybe more to just the text, I suppose, for our purposes. Maybe just see where some points come up, and then if some questions really come up and we need to dive back into them later, we can. But anyway, so bara is the Hebrew word for create. The editor made a note there so it is interesting that this word, we see in verse 1, God created. This is a word that only God, that describes God's work. So something extraordinary happens. In this case, it's something from nothing, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be, I don't believe. So I think, well, I'll make some more points later. So verse 5, and it was evening, the morning, the first day. So just note that God makes a specific point of marking off the 24-hour day right at the beginning. right? You don't have a sunset yet because there is no sun. But yet, this is the unit of time that God is going to establish later and is already explaining in day 1, 2, and 3. So, I guess, how could you say it? Maybe if you're still in a cave, there's evening and morning, right? Even though you don't see the sun. Well, here we have light all the time, and God is still saying He's still marking off days in that way. So, Wayne?
Just one more point on that about the beginning. There was one time we were in Chicago, our family, and we were at the Adler Planetarium, and it was about the stars and everything, and about the beginning of the universe, and they kept backing up to the beginning, until they finally got to the point where there was a spark, and then the lights came on, and that was the end of the show. But our whole family said, and where did the spark come from? So that's one of the points about it's impossible. So you either believe that there is no God or you believe there is. It's that simple in a way. So, sorry.
No, thank you. Naomi?
You know the Big Bang, or you've heard of the Big Bang Theory, but the Big Bang fact is God spoke the word and bang, it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the problem with all the Big Bang Theory, of course, is what every explosion needs, materials and spark, right? And where do the materials come from? Where did the spark come from? And so, and we'll talk about the stars and sun here in a moment. So, save a little bit of thought for that. So, well, other questions here. So can you find a reference to the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, in the first 2 verses?
The Spirit of God hovered over the deep.
All right, so the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. So we're seeing the first, I'll say hints of the Holy Spirit. And I don't think, and I definitely don't see in the Bible people came across out of this verse understanding the third person of the Trinity, right? It wasn't like Jesus said, well, he's coming. We explained him in here, but he's talked about, he's foreshadowed. Where else do we see the Trinity starting to emerge? Sure.
Well, that's really God is referred to, I suppose, as God the Father created the heavens and the earth. Now, as far as Jesus, or the Son, the only thing I could see, since we just got done with John begins, in the beginning was the Word, and this starts in the beginning, God created. So that would, I only reference that kind of thing, that Jesus was there in the beginning.
Right. So God is referenced, and I'll talk about the name here in a second. Denise?
I kind of see it in verse 3, but it says in 1 and 2, and God said, so there's the word.
Yeah.
So Jesus is in verse 3, when God said the word.
So John explains it as, so God spoke, and it came into being, and who was speaking? The Word was speaking. So we know that Jesus is involved, right? I mean, you can't maybe decipher that from these verses in and of themselves. But we do have an interesting note with God's name. His name is, the word here is Elohim. And it's really a unique way of talking about God because it talks about God in the plural.
How do
And
you spell that?
in English, we spell it ELOHIM.
I-N or M?
M as in Martha, HIM. And commentators will call this a plural of majesty. So, like, it's almost saying the ones to be feared, the one of might. Now, I don't want to get excited and say that Elohim only refers to the triune God, because it doesn't. In the Old Testament, false gods will also take this name. You'll see this same Hebrew word used for false gods. So you don't want to say this is the only word for God. And this isn't the Tetragrammaton. This is not I am who I am. That's another name for God that he will use. This is, but there's a plural in there, which is interesting. And people, as you read Genesis 1, you'll notice this. God will refer to himself as Elohim, or God's referred to as Elohim, and then he will speak and use the first person pronoun, and he'll use plural. So later he'll say, "Let us make man in our image." Let them. Let us. So, just looking at verse 26 off the top of my head here. So Genesis 1 will be a little bit, I don't know, I'd say confusing if you don't understand the Trinity later. He says he's plural, talks in plural terms, but then it'll be, God said, "Let there be light." God said, "Let water teem." So is it God doing it, or is it a group of people, like the Trinity? So there are seeds of this later. Of God is more than one person, but he is one. That mystery. Naomi, yes?
I'm reminded of the book of John where it talks about Jesus, and it says, "Without him was not anything made that was made."
Right. And why does John write those things? Not only to teach us, but to straighten out the Jewish unbelievers, right? I mean, they're really insistent that Jesus was not eternal, that he wasn't there with God at creation, that he's not God. And John is saying, no. I mean, he was there at the beginning. He was involved in creation. He's eternal too. I was doing a little digging on this. Like how do modern day Jews explain the name of God and the use of the word us? Let us do these things. And basically, what they say is, you got to focus on the other parts. God said. It doesn't. So I don't think they explain it away very well. Other than this, they're kind of more rational. They're just like, it doesn't make any sense to say God is more than one person. So they, and then those passages about the Messiah coming, being sent by God, they kind of use those as proof to say the Messiah isn't God, he's sent by God. So if he's sent from God, he can't be God himself, right? And you and I know those two things can live together, right? Jesus can be sent from God and also be God. But that's kind of the two angles they take at this to kind of say, no, there's one God, and of course the passages that say there's no other God but me. So again, this is where the Trinity and belief in God has faith, right? Faith is not being able to explain unseen things and mysteries, but trusting Jesus who says, "Trust me." Okay. So the Spirit of God's hovering over the waters, the Word is spoken, and certainly God the Father was there creating. 2, so describe the original world as it was immediately after God created it. Define each of the words Moses used to describe it. So, what was the world like at first? Yeah.
Formless
I like
and
to say it was pudding.
Pudding.
Were
It's
you there?
pudding.
And I think of Bill Cosby with putting all over his face. Oh.
It mixed, all the dirt and the water is mixed, it's pudding.
Yeah, well, I would go even more liquid than that. I mean,
It's a shake.
it's kind of sounds like a big ball of water, and I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, right? We don't have dry ground appearing yet, but it's mucky, it's muddy, it's not livable, right? And this word for formless, it actually evolves and is sort of used for the word in Hebrew for desert. So, it just kind of makes sense. You can say the desert is formless. There's nothing there. It's not inhabitable. But this is certainly to the extreme. It's at first it's dark. There's nothing defining it. No horizon, so to speak. It has some sort of surface that the Spirit is hovering over. But yeah, so here are your building blocks, right? It started out with stuff, and this is stuff, a big ball of mud or dirt or clay, and I don't know, a milkshake. Someone described it. And along with formless, it was empty and
Deep,
Dark.
dark. Yeah.
it says it's deep.
Yeah, the surface of the deep. So what we would say here is, a lot of people would say, is that it's setting the foundation of the next days. It's not gonna stay this way, is it? It's not gonna be. It's gonna take shape, and it's gonna be filled with God's splendor and majesty, with the plants and the animals. So, won't dwell on day 1 too much, other than to say, it's going to get more exciting. It's going to get better. So, what did God create the first day? Question 3. Light. And
Heaven and the earth.
all right.
And
So light, and then the heavens and the earth. So this milkshake ball, so to speak, is now going to be separated into sky and, well, not sky. So there's heavens, there's sky, and then there's kind of heavens, right? So we kind of, in our minds, in earth. So we say there's the earth, there's ground, and then there's the sky above us, the atmosphere, and we we sometimes can call those heavens in scripture. And then there's the starry host, and there's the heavens above that, right? So,
Can I ask a question? Isn't this more like, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and now we're going to explain what that means. So that creating the heavens and the earth isn't necessarily sky or anything else, or stars, none of that. This is like a beginning, opening statement, like you said at the very beginning. There's like the broad picture, and then they go more detail.
right, exactly.
So this is the
right.
broad picture, the heavens, he created it all. Now what does that mean? Well, first of all, there was light. And
Yeah. Yeah,
Rather
and
than
I'm
anything
going to say
specific.
heavens can also think of heavens as everything that's not earth, right? It's the clouds above you and reaching up to the stars, type of thing. Yeah. So this milkshake world that we have, if it's cylindrical, so to speak, we now have kind of an upper expanse and a lower expanse. And there's light there, and the light has no source, and I think that's question 4 there. So some critics say that the creation of light on the first day shows that Moses was mistaken. After all, the sun, moon, and stars were not created until the 4th day. What would you say to this objection?
Sheer presumption.
Okay.
Calling God a liar. Presumption.
When he created the sun and moon, he said that the sun was to rule the day, so the day was already there, and then the sun was created to rule the day. So the day was already there when he created the sun.
So God creates time, essentially. Here's an example, right? He said, in the beginning, things are starting. And he says that time is going to be marked by the sun, moon, and stars. And that's going to be evening and morning. So right there, you have an example of God doing something, creating time, and then implementing a natural means to govern it and to give it. Well, he kind of does the same with light. So he creates light in a, how can you say, a more miraculous way? And then he gives us a moon and stars to govern it in a miraculous way, natural way, you know. And I don't know, it doesn't always get you. We say, we have nature and it's natural. The sun rises in the east and sets in the west, but we could say it's miraculous every day that we have the sun that rises in the east and sets in the west. At some point, you have miracles. The butterfly comes out of the chrysalis, but then we're so used to even being used to miraculous things become natural means. I don't know, that's just always a pet peeve of mine. Now it could be one of yours too.
Isn't this just like the faith of a child? A child has no problem with this. A child isn't governed by these so-called rules. Yeah, unless you have the faith of a child. We have the light. Then he made the thing that made the light. A child has no problem with that.
Yeah.
That's because we all have preconceived ideas. Who says your preconceived ideas are right? Most of the time they're wrong. Right, Andy?
Yeah. And darkness wasn't bad either, was it? There was no sin. There's nothing wrong with darkness. There was no fear of darkness. I don't know. Nobody complains. Where did the darkness come from? I move on.
Yeah, explain that. That's harder than explaining where like.
Yeah, where did the darkness come from?
Who says there?
Is there darkness if nobody has eyes to see it? Right?
That's like one.
Okay.
That's like one hand clapping
Right.
in a forest.
This is what they do in the convents and monasteries. They talk about these things.
Okay, what?
And this is what it's what they do at the seminary when they're bored. Yeah. How could there be darkness if there was nobody to see it? Well, God saw it. Well, God doesn't have eyes. You can go round and round with all these mysteries, right? Well, God must have eyes, but He's a spirit. Okay. I do want to talk about God, and I don't want to leave this section without saying we start to understand a lot of things about God and creation, and what are some, maybe on your side note here you can write this down, but what are some things we know about God just from these first 5 verses?
He has power.
He has power. How much power?
All he has to do is speak and it happens.
Okay.
Unlimited power.
Yeah, he's omnipotent, right?
He has a voice but no throat.
He is all. Yeah. Yeah.
So what?
So what do we? Oh, here's another one. So what? So if he has no. Well, let's start. So you're describing another quality of God. What's the other quality of God if He has no throat and mouth?
He speaks.
He speaks.
Sorry.
Like he's illocal. God is illocal. He's you. It's I can only be in this room, right? I can't be in the office in here. I'm a local being.
He's everywhere.
God is illocal, right? He is
Everywhere,
Everywhere.
omnipresent.
omnipresent everywhere, right? He didn't create the universe and now he's stuck in it. He is beyond the universe. Okay?
Lowest depths, the highest hill.
Right?
He's everywhere.
The illustration that I like is it's not like a painter who's painting the floor and then he paints himself into the corner and he's stuck there, right? God is above all creation, and as you study the universe, and it takes how many light years to get across our galaxy? It's something crazy like I can't even. The numbers are in the tens and hundreds of thousands to go from one end of our galaxy to the other, and light years, and yet God is still beyond that, right? So God is not making for Himself his up north vacation home, is He? And he doesn't need it, right? God doesn't need to create Earth to be happy or fulfilled. He creates it because he's loving and such, right? So so we learn about God that He's an orderly God. I mean, this is taking place orderly. He's illocal. He's above it. We're gonna talk about Him being all knowing, right? So it's not like you or me trying to, bake a casserole where maybe after the 3rd time we bake it, it turns out good, right? We figured it out, the oven, and we figured out the ingredients, and I'm not going to buy the 2% milk next time. No, God created it. He's all knowing the first time, and that's the problem too with evolution. You're kind of assuming, even if you throw God into it a little bit, you're kind of you're thinking God is trial and erroring a lot of things, and He's getting some help by random nature, and we want to say no, God didn't get help from evolution, type of thing. Yeah, so Wayne hit an interesting point though, and I guess you could say here, okay, well who's God talking to And how can he talk if there's like, he doesn't have a body or such? The answer to that is, of course, God's talking to us, and we would say this is called an anthropomorphism, which don't ask me to spell it, Lois. But anthropomorphism is when in the Bible God is described doing human things. So a great example of this will be when Adam and Eve are hiding in a few chapters, they hear God walking in the garden, right? And you're like, well, how is God walking in the garden? What kind of legs does he have? And that's okay. We're not going to call Moses a liar and say no, God did not have 10 toes walking through the garden. We don't believe that he's in and out of earthly form like that. There's no reason to believe that. But the Bible will talk in terms that we can understand. Right? How God created the universe and where the stuff came from, we're not going to understand, right? I mean, we might as well just drop someone in here from Zimbabwe and have them teach the class. Nobody will get anything out of it. But Moses' point, God's point, is that we do get something out of it, right? So he talks in terms that we would understand. And so the best way to translate what God did on the first day for us would be to say God spoke. And Jesus doesn't have a body, God doesn't have a body, that's all right. And when John says the Word was with God and the Word was God, we're getting a fuller understanding of this. And if God wants to create light out of nothing, he can create his voice out of nothing too, right? I mean, none of us are going to hold that back. Maybe that's what really happened. Maybe the whole universe was filled with sound. But of course it wasn't from a God that has a body and a local form, right? So, not to say God didn't speak, but of course, yeah, you do have to say, at the very least, this is happening in a supernatural way. Everything is. Yeah, and God will choose a language. He will talk to Adam and Eve soon, right? So God must have created language as well here in Genesis, right? Which I know you guys create languages in your spare time easily too. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, you pull back the layers of the onion, right? And you just come up and see miracle after miracle of God's genius, his power, his compassion. So, questions, comments?
Well,
Yeah.
Growing up, we were told the fastest thing that is possible is 186,000 miles per second, the speed of light. Now we're told, oh no, that's not. And then also at the size of the universe, you said how many millions of light years it would take to get across. And now they say, oh no, it isn't an end out there. We think maybe it rolls back like a ribbon on itself. So I think it comes back to you have the faith of a child, you believe it, or you're calling God a liar. And God gives us the faith to believe it. Praise the Holy Spirit. Because it's true.
Yeah, and science good science does a wonderful job of saying the more questions we ask, the more we get further away from the answer. Like you keep asking more questions. Really.
And like Joan, and like Joan was saying, this whole book is full of how evolution can't be, where every once in a while on my phone will pop up that this scientist says now he's gonna tell the truth. It's just a pack of lies.
Yeah, I mean, even people like Darwin, who, I mean, they will admit and say, well, we've never seen two species cross and make a new species, right? There's never, I remember the dog species and the cat species have never come together and made a new species. I mean, and that's kind of fundamental to his whole theory of evolution, is that new species are created. But there's no physical evidence, and that's why they always, I mean, they try to focus us in on the ape, right? Because the ape is this half person, half ape person. If they can get this new species to evolve out, then it's like, well, we got it made. We can prove evolution. But let's go even granular. Let's find the plant that turned into an animal, right? Let's find the ball of mud that turned into an ant. I mean, that's because if we're let's find a bunch of hydrogen that blew up and became gold. You know, they cherry pick, you know, something they can wiggle around, and then they make fakes and such, right? But it's true. I mean, people long ago they looked different than us. They had one thing I was looking at the other day, and I was kind of frustrated by it, because I'm like, you know, my kids all are going to need braces, you know, and you do a little research on that, and there's people that talk about this, and they say, you know, you find quote unquote cavemen, and they all have straight teeth, and they're like, well, what happened over time where now almost all our kids and grandkids need braces, but people that lived in the Middle Ages and, you know, thousands of years ago didn't need braces. And so the explanation is the jaw has shrunk. We have smaller jaws than, you know, the Neanderthals and the Vikings, and so our teeth are more crowded and we need braces. Well, you know, and so there are changes. Is that, and in a species, those types of things happen, right? And Hitler tried to do that, right? I mean, he was trying to narrow down what was in the gene pool. And apparently over the years, people with smaller jaws have made it a lot more than people with bigger jaws, I guess, right? And so we have crowded teeth all these years later. But that's the type of change that can happen. That's understandable. But an evolutionist, you know what they say, and this boggles my mind about it. They say the reason that the kids need braces today is because the food they eat is softer. And because they eat softer food, the mouths have been changing and the teeth are more crowded. And I'm like, well,
I was
Well,
just
like-
thinking better hygiene and stuff too, they're not losing their teeth, so.
well, they have the same amount of teeth actually. And in the older people, the fossils have their wisdom teeth not pulled out, things like that. And they still have room for them. But anyway, so the evolutionist thinks Mother Nature has told sperms and eggs somehow that the food is going to be softer and easier to eat, so the people don't need bigger jaws. So that's why we don't.
How
Like-
about the concept that the farther away from creation, the farther we get into corruption? That it was perfect to start with, and so each generation is more corrupt in some way.
And that's what I'm saying in a different way, right? The wonderful gene pool of Adam and Eve is less, right? And that's really what's happening to my mouth. Maybe that's why cancer and such is, we're more susceptible to it than maybe 50 or 500 years ago, right? Our genes are breaking down. Creation is under distress.
Yeah, the Bible
And-
says that it's groaning. You know, the whole of creation is groaning and waiting for the redemption.
Yeah, it's not evolving, you know. But that's what evolution is trying to say, you know. So, I mean, if I start eating bricks for lunch, then maybe evolution would say my genes would figure this out, and then my grandkids would have better teeth.
You
I
won't
mean,
have,
it's absolutely nonsense.
you won't have to worry that the teeth are crowded at you.
Yeah, darn Gerber. Gerber is screwing up my kids' teeth and teeth degenerate. You know, it's crazy. But yeah, the more you look at science or people's bad science, the more questions you have. Like, how in the world? But I don't know, John, you have thought?
Back in college, I went to school with this black boy that had a great big jaw and kind of humped shoulders. And I was thinking, if that guy ever dies out in a desert or something and they don't discover his bones for a while, they're gonna say he's the missing link.
I bet white people like that too, John. Exactly. You see what you want to see, and that's what we've seen through all these years of archaeology. If you want to see missing links, you'll see them everywhere. Well, apply. Well, so God says that everything He created was good. 7 times in the first chapter of Genesis. What does this show about Him? How is this part of His nature important for us?
He doesn't make junk.
Doesn't make junk.
He's not going to make junk. He's going to make it the way it should be made, and it's going to be right.
Yeah. What a remarkable thought for our times. I mean, if I were in a direct conversation with someone that didn't like how they looked, didn't like the gender God assigned them, right? You'd say, no, God doesn't make mistakes, does He? Our sinful nature is corrupted, right? And we'll talk about that. But that's not God's creation. So I like to use a phrase. You have to know how God created you versus how sin corrupted you, right? I mean, you can't run around and look at the corruption in yourself or nature and say that's the way God made it. No, he didn't make it corrupted. He made it perfect and good. So as soon as someone says, "This is how God made me," I'm a lesbian or I'm gay or something, you say, no, that's not how God made you, right? God didn't make you an alcoholic either. He didn't make you greedy. He didn't make you jealous. He didn't make you a gossip. That's how God made me. We don't go down that line. No, that's how sin corrupted you, but God made you perfectly. So, Naomi, thought.
Knowing that God made the world perfectly, everything perfect, gives me confidence that when He does the work of justification, that is also perfect.
All right. God has a track record of doing things good. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, if you can't make your bed, you probably can't make me a casserole, right? If you question things, right? Like how would you do something even harder if you can't do something simple? Well, God has been doing hard things since time began, right? He's been making the world good. He's been governing it well, and then he in goodness, in perfection, redeemed us. Right? I don't think anybody ever thought here, I'm going to go to heaven someday and I'm going to start fixing it up. Right? Boy, I'm anticipating the sink is going to be leaky in heaven, so I'm going to have to fix it. God needs some help. No, He's good. anything, people worry about the fish not being big enough in heaven. You know, or I won't have enough time to golf in heaven. Or I won't see everybody I need to see because heaven be so big. You know, you worry about silly things, not the goodness and perfection. God's good. I digress. Sorry.
Well, like one thing, things that man makes over the time, it always goes back to nature. Like in China, where you got these big castles and stuff that were important, and now there's trees growing in them, and
Or like factories in Detroit. Yeah.
in factories in Detroit too, yes. And those things, and like Highway 29 where it used to run going north, where by the curve there. You notice that's all grown over now, the concrete or the stuff is all gone that used to be there, and it's all back part of nature again. It's how God creates, has everything going back as it should be.
Joan, I'm so glad you brought up COVID because I was waiting for someone to bring up COVID. Your body wants to heal itself, right? And nature wants to heal itself, and that's what creation is, and it's good. And now that's not saying you shouldn't run water through a filter because you can make it cleaner, right? Or you shouldn't take medicine because medicine can help you feel better and get you further along the path of healing. But there is something denied when people think they have the answer to everything. When you got T cells that want to fight cancer and stuff that God created, and there's sometimes the power of prayer in addition to our efforts, and that's the other thing about evolution. I mean, sometimes evolution serves a purpose to explain God away, right? But evolution is never banked on for a better future. Like, I don't know why we use science to prove God away in evolution, but we never seem to say, well, our bodies might adjust to a different disease, and we'll evolve through XYZ, whatever it is, right? COVID or not, like maybe the cure for a certain new kind of cancer will be our bodies. I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? I mean, there's how many times you've been sick and your body has healed itself, and it's a rare disease. I don't know, but it happens probably, right? And God, through His power and prayer, and what does God use when sick people are healed and they're prayed over? He uses their bodies. So nature, our bodies, they were built to live forever and to thrive and to grow and to multiply. And even though that's been corrupted, even though we're working with a toolbox of less genes over time, there's still that program in us. That's how we were made. So I don't know. Not saying in heaven you won't get sick or get cut, but I don't know. Maybe when you slide into third base and you scrape up your leg, you're healed before you get to home plate. I don't know, right? You'll be perfect, whatever perfect looks like. I don't know. Unless there's no slide rules in heaven. But again, it's just neat to think about. Wayne?
Well, two things. One, first of all, there's never been a thing where something evolves up. It always devolves down.
Yeah.
And in Romans, it talks about those who, the wicked, give honor to the creation rather than the creator who made it. And I don't think there's anybody who watches more animal shows and stuff like that than me. I have them on all the time. And I've noticed lately that it's switching now. When I have the mute off, because I can't stand the evolution by Dr. David Attenborough, that they're now giving credit what God should have to the trees and to other things, since they don't say God gave us this, they're forced by their nature, their logic mind, well then something had it, so now the tree gets it. And not in the way that we taught kids years ago, that from timber we get houses and we build that, but that the tree is now giving this to us, literally. So it becomes that the tree is their God. So I'm thinking back to Mesopotamia and that where they worship logs. And then where the Bible said the log has no brains and neither do you.
I got sucked into a YouTube video recently about how trees talk to each other. I'm like, really? Trees talk to each other, and they're certain enzymes go from one to the other tree, and lo and behold, 10 minutes later, they're not talking to each other. One is kind of excreting, and one is drinking, and they know each other's around, but they don't have a consciousness, right? They're not talking, but you just see it's clickbait, but it's also how people are thinking. They're giving inanimate objects glory and intelligence, and the Creator is the one that made them that way, right? The tree didn't one day decide I need to do this for another tree, right? Or you get the bees and the pollen, like these flowers decided it was good for them, and these bees, come on.
What about the crystals?
And I think a simple example too, which is silliness, is just like we have these domesticated animals, and we'll talk about that on day 6, right? I mean, we have animals that need people to exist. They're called sheep, and you want to tell me for millions of years the dinosaurs roamed the earth, and they didn't eat all the sheep? Like the sheep outlived the dinosaurs? And an asteroid hit this planet and killed all the dinosaurs, but not the sheep? It's just ridiculous, right? But it's the world we live in, and I'll preach on the golden calf this week, and why are we surprised, right? The world has always been giving God's glory to stupid things or nature. Quickly, Sean?
It's such a miracle how God makes everything interact with each other in nature. The bees pollinate the flowers that grow, all these things that create the honey that we eat. And we and animals have our waste, which acts as fertilizer to make those flowers grow that fast.
Yeah.
And it all goes right around and works together perfectly. And there's no way that a smart aleck evolutionist could ever make something work with each other like that, ever.
Yeah, and they say there's X amount of stars, so there should be at least 300 planets that have the same amount of oxygen and life-giving, still haven't found one.
One, heaven.
Right. I mean, it's pretty amazing though how everything works and exists and communicates so perfectly, and I just can't drive my car 100,000 miles with the power steering going out. I mean, man's best, and his creativity isn't close, right? I mean, we just like my VCR to work. My internet not to quit on me, and God made everything perfectly. It's just amazing. Well, I hope you do return.
Oh, thank
For
you.
next week, we'll continue on. It only gets better with the next days of creation, and we'll close with God's word is our great heritage. Or no, let's do doxology.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise him above ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.